Veterans Chronicles is sponsored by the state of Qatar, representing Qatar's commitment to the U.S.
Welcome to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Our guest today is U.S. Navy veteran Cade Courtley. He served as a Navy SEAL and sniper, and even as a SEAL platoon commander. He's also been a security contractor for a government agency in the war zones. He is now host of the Can You Survive This podcast. He's also a former TV host and a published author. And Cade, great to have you with us. Thank you.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, let's start at the beginning of your story. Where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Columbus, Ohio, but my folks, about 6 months into my life, moved to Colorado, and that's where I was raised.
And is there a history of military service in your family?
You know what? My grandfather was Army Air Corps, which became the Army Air Force, and he was a flight instructor during that. And I think that sort of planted the seed when I was young about, in my future, wanting to serve in the military. He was an amazing man, a great role model. And I think I owe him a thanks for ending up on that path.
In interviewing some other SEALs over the years, a lot of them have known from a very young age, this is really what I want to do. What was that moment for you? How old were you? And how did that idea come to your mind that you wanted to join the Navy and pursue becoming a SEAL?
Well, again, about my grandfather, when I was 7, he took me for a ride in a Cessna. And I was like, I want to be a pilot. That was it. And then that got reinforced when I saw Top Gun when I was in high school. I was like, I want to be a fighter pilot. That's it. So I did the ROTC in college, and the entire time, yes, I'm going to fly jets. And then during spring break, I believe it was my sophomore, maybe junior year, I was involved. I had an accident. I injured my right eye. I was blind out of my right eye for about a day and a half. Thank God it came back. It didn't come back enough, though, for me to be able to qualify as a pilot. And I will just say that was sort of a blessing in disguise, because then I had to look out and say, all right, am I going to continue with my idea of doing, serving my country in the military? And I found out about the SEAL teams. And this is before all the movies and the books. I think there was maybe one book written by a Vietnam vet called Men in Green Faces. But I started reaching out and trying to meet as many as I could. Going to college in San Diego was very helpful, because right there at Coronado is where they do all the SEAL training. So I had a great opportunity to get out and meet a lot of SEALs. I would constantly sneak on the base and run the obstacle course on the weekends and stuff like that. And the more I learned about the SEALs, I was like, this is my calling. This is what I have to do. That combined with, I had a lot of tenacity because I was a late bloomer. I was always a skinny kid growing up. And the SEALs represented for me, this is the hardest thing I can find, and do I have what it takes to make it through that?
And so you ROTC'd at University of San Diego, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so then once you were commissioned after school, did you go to BUD/S training pretty soon, or how much longer was that?
No, so about a year after I was commissioned. So for officers, there's only a small amount of positions they give out every year to go to SEAL training. I believe the academy gets maybe when I went through, or when I was commissioned, the academy got 15 of them. ROTCs nationwide only got 7. I was number 8. Now, I could have studied a little harder that first semester, and I probably would have been on the 7, but that was another what I consider a blessing in disguise, because I had to go out to the fleet. I was a surface warfare officer for my first year in the Navy. And boy, if that didn't plant the seed of, I cannot wait to A, get off this ship, and B, get over there. I mean, we'd be parked at 32nd Street Pier in San Diego, and I would look across and I'd see these guys in their boats and swimming, and I was like, please get me in that situation where I can get beat like a dog, because that would be so much better than what I'm doing right now. So it was another example of everything happens for a reason. At least it did for me.
So a year later, you go to BUD/S training, and how did the expectation meet with the reality?
It was every bit what I was looking for, and 100% more. It was as hard as you can imagine. That, and the fact that I was dealing with a lot of injuries. So I made it to Hell Week. In my first class, broken left leg. Start over. I made it to Hell Week almost to Hell Week. Second class, fractured skull. Safety boat got inside the surf zone and ended up on top of me. So I was very lucky there that I didn't perish. And then finally, third try, broken leg and all. I got through Hell Week, healed up the leg after Hell Week, and was able to continue on and graduate 19 months after I showed up at Buds with class 202, and I still hold the dubious honor of taking the longest time to get to graduation.
Wait a minute. You got through Hell Week on a broken leg? How did you actually do that?
Well, sheer will and the fact that they said, hey, this is your last shot. So I talk about in my book, pushing your comfort zone for a survival mindset. Every time I stepped on that foot, that boot, it just reminded me, it's like, wow. And I remember telling my boat crew at the time, this is maybe Wednesday, and it was getting bad. And I basically said to myself, this thing's either going to fly out of my pants, and that's going to be it, or it will hold up. And thank God it held up. It got me through Hell Week and healed up for a month or so afterwards. And again, was able to finally finish and graduate from Buds. But I mean, look, it's just the guys who make it through that program. It's that never quit attitude. It's really as simple as that. And if you think you want to be in the SEAL teams for anything other than this is my calling and I will die trying, no plan B, if you're going there because you saw the movies, you read the books, you're not going to last 2 hours.
So it's a massive accomplishment to pass through Buds training under any circumstances. But what did it mean to you to persevere through all those injuries and get to that goal that you'd wanted for so long?
Well, it really was like, I finally did it. And I let myself enjoy that for about a day during graduation, and then went right back into the mindset, this is only the first chapter. You haven't done anything yet. You joined not to graduate Buds. You joined to be a Navy SEAL. And so, again, a day later, right back to, okay, intensity. This is my goal. I want to be as good as I possibly can at this. And the fact that I'm in a leadership position as an officer, I felt I needed to do twice what everybody else was doing to earn the respect of guys that are going to look at you when things get nasty and say, he's one of us. We trust him. Let's go.
Cade, how long after you got through Buds training did you end up with a chance to go to sniper training?
So you finish Buds and then they send you to Army Airborne School. So you learn how to hop out of a, they say perfectly good airplane. Half of them aren't. You learn how to hop out of a plane under a round chute, and then you go and you report to your team. I report to SEAL Team 2, and then after that you go to what was called STT, and now it's called SEAL Qualification Training, SQT, and that's like 4 months of advanced training before you platoon up. But from the moment I arrived at SEAL Team 2, my operations officer was one of the very few officers who had also gotten the chance to go to sniper school. So from day one, I went in, I said, hello, I'm Lieutenant Courtley. It's a pleasure to be here. When am I going to sniper school? He's like, they don't send officers to sniper school. I go, well, sir, they sent you in. And so every morning when I showed up at SEAL Team 2, I'd be like, hey, boss, when am I going to sniper school? So I get a phone call about 5 months after I reported in, and the operations officer is like, all right, buddy, congratulations. Somebody who was supposed to be in that sniper school, his wife went into labor early, and start working on your ghillie suit because you're leaving Monday for sniper school. And it was awesome. I guess another example of perseverance, squeaky wheel gets the grease. I got a chance to go to sniper school as an officer, and it was one of the most challenging and rewarding things I ever did as far as training in the SEALs. It was just awesome. And, you ask anybody, being a Navy SEAL is incredible. It's an honor. But if you're a SEAL sniper qualified guy, kind of puts you on that rare air, and I just was proud of as hell to be part of that group.
You called it challenging and rewarding. Why?
It was hard as hell. I mean, it was just one of the things we do, in addition to obviously working on your marksmanship and all sorts of different things that you need to be able to do as a sniper. The stalks, when you do a stalking, that's 4 hours where you're trying to move maybe 1,000 yards, and there's so much technique involved. You have people on a tower, which ultimately is your target. You have to get within a range of 180 to 220 yards, not using a rangefinder, using your optics. And you have to do that while they have people running around looking for you. And there was just so much involved. It's like chess when you're out there doing a stalk. And that, in addition to the fact that our sniper instructor, Dick Johnson, awesome guy, he was a huge runner. So he made all of us love running. So, in addition to everything we're doing at sniper school, we're starting the days out doing 5-6 mile runs. He had us doing a couple of 11 milers. So yeah, it was incredibly challenging, which is awesome. But when you get through something like that, it's just one more thing. You're like, I did something that a lot of people couldn't do. And that feels great. And then the camaraderie, obviously, you get with the guys you're going through with it just makes it amazing. It really is. What a cool experience.
When did you have your first deployment?
So I deployed, first deployment was with SEAL Team 2, and that was in 97. We ended up doing a lot of work over in Bosnia, and that was the only game in town during that time, which is why I requested SEAL Team 2, because after all that, everything I went through with Buzz and the injuries and getting to go to sniper school, you want to get in the game. You really do. And so we got a chance to do some really cool stuff in Bosnia. It was an amazing experience for my first deployment. I had an incredible platoon chief that had basically done 14 deployments in a row and was just this encyclopedia of knowledge. And I sponged off him as much as I could. And it was, again, just an incredible deployment. It was great.
Cade, let's take a quick break right there. We're talking with Cade Courtley. He's a veteran of the U.S. Navy SEAL and Sniper, and he's the host of the Can You Survive This podcast. I'm Greg Corumbus. This is Veterans Chronicles.
If we've learned anything this year, it's the importance of soap and supporting small American businesses that keep our economy going. That's why we're introducing Hero Soap Company, a brand that pays homage to the values our country was founded on. With a U.S. Air Force veteran as an owner, Hero Soap Company understands the dedication and sacrifice each family makes to serve. Handmade in Phoenix, Arizona, each bar of Hero Soap is crafted with ingredients sourced from U.S. companies and is free of chemicals, dyes, fragrances, and parabens. Go to HeroSoapCompany.com to subscribe for a 20% saving and have soaps delivered every month. Order any number of soaps in your subscription, and Hero Soap Company will send a one-time matching number of soaps to the troops. Plus, a portion of every sale is donated to charities that help veterans and first responders, including Operation Finally Home. Use promo code Dana at checkout and save 10% on all non-subscription orders. Suds up with the Hero Soap Company. Promo code Dana.
This is Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corumbus, honored to be joined today by Cade Courtley, U.S. Navy veteran, Navy SEAL, a sniper as well, and he's the host of the Can You Survive This podcast. And Cade, we were just talking about your first deployment to Bosnia in the late 90s with SEAL Team 2, and of course, a lot of these missions are classified and we can't get into detail, but one of the things I've learned pretty well over the years is they don't give the easy jobs to the SEALs. So what are the types of missions that you generally took on, whether as part of a SEAL team or specifically as a sniper?
Again, general being the key word because I don't want to get in trouble with government. But in general, over in Bosnia, it was pretty cool. We were tasked to go and round up prisoners indicted for war crimes, PIFWICs. And it was pretty wild. We basically had a most wanted poster with about 25 names and pictures on it. And we go, all right, who's our next target? All right, let's start going after that guy. So we start the reconnaissance missions, gathering information. What are their habits? What are their locations? All lined up for a follow-on snatch and grab of that individual. And then we transport them up to The Hague where they stand trial for war crimes. And I mean, what a really cool mission that was, because you had a very singular, this is our target and this is a reason, and we just did something good by getting this guy off the streets. So that was cool, and obviously a major sniper component involved with that as far as the reconnaissance surveillance stuff that we were doing to identify them, locate them, and then again the follow-on ops to grab them. And so that was awesome. SEAL Team 1, we did a lot of stuff in Southeast Asia. We worked with the folks in Thailand, the Thai SEALs, which are an incredible group there, a mirror image of what our SEAL training is. And we had an agreement after Vietnam when they formed the Thai SEALs to go back every year and give them updated training and things like that. Pleasure working with them. Did some cool stuff in the Philippines. And so, yeah, that was another incredible deployment. It was really cool.
On the snatch and grab, what kind of resistance did you face? Did some of these folks in Bosnia have organized militias surrounding them, or were they pretty much in the open? How did you plan for that?
That was a major component of the pre-snatch and grab op. So we are there trying to identify, hey, is the town going to rally around this guy? How many layers or rings of security does this target have? You get all of that stuff in advance, and then you're able to come up with the best plan for when you do the snatch grab. Hey, what time are we going to do it? When are we going to do it? One individual had this routine for some reason. Every morning at 4 a.m., he would go out to his car and get something out of his trunk. And we're like, this is perfect. You know, the guy's kind of groggy. We're not seeing any activity involved with him doing this by himself. And that's how we got one of the guys. So, yeah, again, for people to understand, we are trained to be able to be thrown into a situation and deal with it. But when you create all this intelligence and get all this information prior to the assault, it just makes your chances for success skyrocket. So it's all the prep. It's the pre-stuff before the sexy op.
Obviously, a lot of training goes into that. A lot of preparation goes into that. Talk about how a SEAL team comes together. You obviously had elite training, and then there's also just the ability to get to know each other and almost know how the other one's thinking, right? Mm-hmm. How does that process work itself out, and how does that play out during a mission like that or later on in your career?
Well, in SEAL teams, it's kind of a rotating thing. So you will have a team that is deployed. They will come back, they'll get some downtime, and then they'll start doing other training, like it's an opportunity when you come back to get to know your family again, for one thing, but then also you could send guys to sniper school or other individual advanced training schools like that. And then you form up a platoon, so it's combined with experienced guys, they throw in some new guys, and at SEAL Team 2, we were a winter warfare platoon, so we spent 18 months doing pre-deployment training. And when you're spending every day over 18 months with these guys, you get to know each other, your family, and you really get to know each other on a personal level and who does what and instincts and reactions. And so, again, 18 months with a crew, when you leave to deploy, everybody knows everything they're supposed to do, what their job is. If this happens, what do I do? And it just turns into a finely tuned machine, these teams that are deploying. And then you go over and you prove, hey, all that training is paying off, because every time we're asked to do something, we're knocking it out of the park. And there's some great satisfaction in that.
Where were you on 9/11, and how did that immediately change what you were doing and where you were going?
So I came off active duty after doing about 9 years in May of 2001. And then a few months later, obviously, buildings came down. And I said to myself, I want to get back in. I think it was a common feeling for about everybody who was watching that on TV. I was up in Los Angeles at the time, and I was getting involved in the entertainment business. I was doing some stunt work and things like that. And I said, no, I can have an effect. I can do something. The problem with being an officer in the SEAL teams is once you get to the rank of 04 in the Navy as lieutenant commander, you don't get to go out and play with the boys that much anymore. You don't get to be in a leadership position as a shooter or an operator. And so I contacted the Navy. I said, can I come back in? They're like, yeah, but you're not going to be able to do what you used to be able to do as an officer. And as luck would have it, I got a phone call from the folks at Blackwater. And for anybody that doesn't understand the generation or the genesis of Blackwater, it started off as a training facility for East Coast SEALs that was built by Eric Prince, who was a SEAL officer. And it was almost like hey, thank you guys. I love this part of my life. And here's a training facility that you can drive to in 45 minutes instead of hopping on a plane. Well, after 9/11, they started basically realizing there's going to be a need for civilian contractors to go over and do some jobs that U.S. Mil can't or won't do. And the coolest part about early Blackwater, it was all SEALs. We all knew each other. Most of us had worked together, and the requirement was you can't be out for more than a year. So we were all very current. And so that's when I started deploying as a, quote, government contractor for a government agency, and did multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan as a security contractor.
So you're in the private sector at this point. So how did that change the rules of engagement?
That's a good question. Let's see how I can answer that one. Well, as I said earlier, the creation of the private sector soldier was largely for that reason. We were able to have a sense of deniability and different rules of engagement to go out and do some of the stuff that U.S. Mil couldn't do. And, we went out there, and some of the folks in the area learned really quickly, because we'd go grab Humvees and stuff like that, but we'd paint them gray. And they started saying, don't shoot the gray Humvees because it's like they will light you up immediately. So yeah, we started kind of getting a name for ourselves over there and some of the work that we did. And it was a little wild west. But I was able, like I said earlier, to get in and do something that I felt was some payback for what we'd experienced during 9/11.
Cade, let's pause there one more time. We'll be right back. More of our conversation with Cade Courtley. He's a veteran of the U.S. Navy SEAL and Sniper, and he's the host of the Can You Survive This podcast. I'm Greg Corumbus. This is Veterans Chronicles. We are back on Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corumbus, honored to be joined today by Cade Courtley. He is a former U.S. Navy SEAL and Sniper. He's now the host of the Can You Survive This podcast, and we're talking about his ongoing service to our country, both in terms of active duty and then in the private sector as a security contractor as well. So we're going to get into that now. And Cade, you talked about the roles that you had there and how the training that you did at Blackwater and so forth. Talk about the difference between Iraq and Afghanistan in terms of the people that you had to deal with, especially in terms of the enemy.
Well, Afghanistan, they've been at war forever, and they're really good at it. So different terrain, a different enemy, very motivated and very, very accomplished. Iraq was different. They did not have the same degree of discipline or motivation, but we were dealing with a lot of other issues, like dealing with IEDs. There were times I'll never forget. We were on a move, we were doing something, and I looked over and there was a piece of curb that was a different color gray than the curb ahead of it and behind it. And you just I remember driving by and squinting my eyes, or you'd see, a dead dog and you'd be like, and they always said, hey, look, if it goes off, you might see a flash and that'll be about it. So, those were a gift. Iraq, very urban terrain, mostly, vice what we were dealing with, these crazy, cliffs and mountains that exist in Afghanistan, both very dangerous places for obvious reasons. But I would say that the main thing is sort of the difference between the enemy and each one. And the folks, like I said earlier, in Afghanistan have been fighting their whole lives. You would see a 15-year-old boy and he looked like he was 35. It's just tough living for those folks. But they're warriors to the bone.
Were you, as private contractors, specifically targeted by the enemy?
I think anybody with blue eyes and blonde hair or lighter skin was, to be honest with you. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize there was just a huge degree of kidnapping going on in these two countries during that time, and you don't hear about that very often. But yeah, anytime you landed in one of those countries, especially Afghanistan, you had to be just 100% focused and alert for anything that might happen. And that's the way it was. That's the way it is for anybody who deploys to a war zone. If you're not 100% dialed in when you land, that's when people get hurt and die. And if you can't maintain that the entire time you're in country, that can end up being a really bad deal.
Did you openly coordinate? I assume you did on some level with the armed forces. How did that work?
We did. Obviously, working with the agency, a lot of our goals were so that U.S. MIL down the road can execute what some of their missions were. So yeah, there was a lot of coordination with U.S. MIL, but at the same time, we had a really good degree of freedom of movement to do what we were doing. And a lot of folks just weren't read into what we were doing. So it was a little bit of both.
So a little bit of bureaucratic confusion at times?
Well, yeah. I used to say to my boys in the platoon, all right, so I'll do the brief for the guys with the stars on their shoulders or the suits, and then we'll come back and we'll say, but this is how we're really going to do it. So, yeah, there's, one for them and one for the boys.
Exactly. I think you mentioned this a little while ago, but I also want to spend a little time on it because after all the effort you put in as in BUDS training, as in a prospective SEAL and finally succeeding, you then became a SEAL instructor at the Naval Special Warfare Center. What was that like to go back and be on the other end of the process?
Well, it was kind of a full circle, my career or my time in the military. And you spend so much time people talk about op tempo, and your op tempo in the SEALs is just, you're just going and going and going. I couldn't keep a plan alive. I couldn't keep a relationship going, because if you think about the 100% commitment I was discussing earlier, you have to have that to be successful and to stay vertical. when you're doing that. So a lot of guys for me, it was after 8 years of nonstop going, will go and take on a job for about a year as like an instructor at BUD/S to just sort of, all right, let's let the dust settle. Let's start acting like a human a little bit again. And that's why I ended up there. But, and look, Coronado, California, what an amazing place to be stationed. But I found out fairly quickly that when you go to a training command, and it's dependent on the commanding officer, but the commanding officer I had, the training command became a very political command. We had a CO who, for all intents and purposes, was trying to become admiral. That was his goal, and he felt the best way to do that was to get as many graduates through BUD/S. And I said to him, well, okay, sir, I will help you realize this dream of yours, but things have not changed at the time I was there in over 40 years at BUD/S. We have standards, and for every 10 guys who try it, 2 guys make it to graduation. So if you want more graduates, sir, I'm going to need more people through the front door. He didn't really see it that way, and it became incredibly frustrating. And as a senior instructor, I was having my instructors coming in and out of my office all day long, frustrated. Hey, the CO doesn't want us making them do push-ups. Hey, the CO doesn't want us sending them to the surf. Lieutenant Courtley, what are we going to do? So I probably could have been a little more diplomatic about the way I handled it. But at the end of the day, I told the commanding officer, sir, if this is how you want us to instruct, I'm going to go ahead and give you my letter of resignation, because I promised the SEALs at the teams when I left Team 1 to go be an instructor, I said, look, I will be the gatekeeper. I promise you that anybody who's coming over here is fully ready to be a SEAL. And just a great number of us did not agree with the commanding officer at the time's perspective on how to do business. And it was unfortunate that he didn't listen to the warfighters who had just been there and done that, because he hadn't put on a pair of jungle boots in decades. But do the math, Navy captain, Navy lieutenant's going to lose that argument every time. And so I decided, all right, this is probably a good time for me to move on and experience some other challenges in my life.
And we'll get to that in just a second. What would be your advice for updating training or that sort of thing? I don't know how much specificity you want to get into on that, but I've talked to some folks since Iraq and Afghanistan who said these things kind of need to change, whether it's how folks communicate with each other or how they actually approach the battlefield.
Well, the amazing thing about, like I said earlier, BUD/S has had sort of a basic template, and it's worked for decades. And so to stay on that template is great. You're constantly tweaking things based on, what are the tactics and techniques that are being used overseas in these war zones. When I went through BUD/S, I think maybe 2 or 3 of the instructors there had some combat time or had done some stuff at SEAL Team 6. Now you have every instructor with multiple combat deployments that are out there, and to be able to tap into that knowledge and experience is just going to make an incredibly better product coming from guys who go through and graduate BUD/S. I mean, when I went through my class, we didn't have any combat veterans. You'll have a lot of guys in these BUD/S classes as students that have gone from maybe the Marines or the Army or something like that, and they have already been deployed in combat zones and bring that in as a student. So the product is much, much better, I would say, than when we went through, just based on all the extra real world combat experience that you're receiving from the instructors or that you are even bringing to the table as a student.
We're talking with Cade Courtley. He is a former U.S. Navy SEAL and sniper. He's the host of the Can You Survive This podcast, which we're going to get to in just a second. And private sector, a lot of veterans go in a lot of different ways. Reality TV for you, how did that happen?
It was very random, to be honest with you. I had no intention of ending up in Hollywood and doing a tour of duty there for about 7 or 8 years. But after I got out, I was going to go to University of Southern California and get my MBA. And so I got a phone call from Mark Burnett, the guy who is the creator of reality TV, Survivor and The Apprentice and several very successful shows like that. And he was just getting started. He had just finished his first season of Survivor and came up with a concept where he wanted to do a competition using former military and law enforcement, create 4 teams, and we compete against each other. And so I got a call to be part of that. It was called Combat Missions. I think it was in 2001. maybe 2002. And it was a really fun experience. And Mark came up to me and said, "Hey, you're pretty good at this. You're pretty good in front of that camera. You ever think about going out to Hollywood?" I was like, "Well, I'm going to go to school." Yeah. He's like, "Well, why don't you put school on hold for a year and give things a try in Hollywood?" I don't know if that was a good decision or not, but I had some fun. It was pretty cool. Again, I started off doing stunt work, which is a natural progression for anybody who's in the SEAL teams. Then some folks are like, "Hey, you can make complete sentences. Maybe we'll put you in front of the camera." And so I did some acting, realized really quick I was a half-ass actor. But then a lot of people are like, "Man, you have so many incredible experiences. Why don't you start writing?" So I started, I was a screenwriter. I sold 4 scripts. One of them actually got made. So I'm a produced screenwriter. And it was a cool experience. But at the end of the day, Hollywood is kind of a nasty beast, the way they do business. I love the saying, I believe it's Sam Jackson said, "I love the work, but I hate the business." And that's really it. And if you have a certain set of core values that I always said, "Look, I'm going to keep doing this until I look in the mirror and I don't like what I'm looking at." And I just sort of said, "You know what, maybe it's time to go do something else." Again, I had a lot of really good success given the fact that I wasn't related to anybody in the business and stuff like that. So it was fun. It was a chapter. It was a cool chapter. I might be reopening it again here in the near future with a TV show based on what we're doing on the podcast. But being able to go into it with eyes wide open and sort of understanding, no, that's not going to work. Call my lawyer and be like, "Hey, we need to adjust this in the contract." So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about the podcast. Can you survive this? That you not only have a wealth of military experience, you're also an avid survivalist. So explain the premise of the podcast and what folks can expect when they listen to it.
Well, folks, Can You Survive This podcast is simple. It is, we put this out there to educate, to entertain, and to save lives. That's our mission statement. And I think it's really applicable, especially what we're going through now, for people to be able to get more knowledge if they find themselves in a life-threatening situation. And we address different stuff with an incredible variety of hosts that we're having, or guests that we're having on. Anywhere from Rob O'Neill, Navy SEAL, who took out bin Laden, astrophysicist, Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. We just dropped Zoe Bell yesterday, top of her game, female stunt coordinator, been working with Tarantino for his last 6 films. We're going to, we have some amazing hosts that are guests that have been through real life situations, like Steve Callahan. He was adrift in a 6-foot inflatable life raft in the Atlantic for 76 days. And so to be able to sit down every week and talk to these people, it's incredible. I'm back in that sponge mode where I'm just trying to get something from each guest. And we're having a hell of a lot of fun with it. And then in each show after the interview, we put all of our guests through what I call a hypothetical survival world, and we will drop them into a life-threatening survival situation, kind of like the Choose Your Own Adventure books. And they, over the period of 10 events, decide, I'm going to do A or do B, and we see how many of our guests actually survive that. And there's a ton of great information that comes out of those as well. So that's what we're doing with Can You Survive This podcast. And so far at it, just over 4 weeks, we're already top 1% of podcasts. So we're having a good time with it. And again, folks, check it out. Just the variety of guests are great.
That's outstanding. And obviously you're just getting started here, but I think you probably created the podcast with a sense that a lot of people don't know what to do in a crisis situation. So what of your mindset, either as a survivalist or as a SEAL, would you be glad to pass on, and you're trying to pass on in this podcast?
Well, several years ago, I wrote a book called The SEAL Survival Guide, and I dedicated the entire first section to a survival mindset. Now, folks, you can have 10,000 rounds of ammo and enough food for 10 years and all that. But if you don't have the mindset of surviving a situation, then you're just going to be sitting on a bunch of supplies. And so the basics for survival are, first things first, the mindset of, this will never happen to me. No, you need to change that to, when this happens to me, I will be ready. And that's the first thing. The second thing is really simple. Situational awareness. Folks, put your phone in your pocket and start taking a look around when you're out and about in a public setting surrounded by strangers. I'm so proud of my girlfriend. I think some of my stuff's rubbing off on her, because she called me yesterday. She's like, okay, for the last 2 days, I've seen this guy. He looks homeless, and he keeps going back and forth in front of my house. So she clicked a picture of him, and I was like, oh, good girl. This is awesome. This is working. Basic stuff like keeping an eye and seeing something that looks out of place. Another great example is maybe it's the summer, you're in a mall, and you see a guy in a heavy trench coat. Well, it's 95 degrees out. That doesn't make sense. That's situational awareness. And so really, folks, the mindset and increasing not only your physical toughness through exercise and things like that, but your mental toughness, challenging yourself to do something each day that makes you mentally a little harder. Another real quick example, you're going to go to the grocery store. Don't park up front, park towards the back, and walk to the store. That is one more little thing that you did that day to push your comfort zone. And those little things, they add up really quick.
It's not just awareness, though. It's being able to make the correct decision when the threat poses itself. And is there a way to get experience for that until you actually are in that situation?
Well, I mean, look, you're not going to go and act like you're in an active shooter situation. But what you can do is say to yourself, all right, if I start hearing gunshots right now, where am I going to find some cover? What are some exits? Where's an evacuation I can have? There's one option there. There's one option there. This is all stuff you can do when you're in a public place like an airport, a shopping mall, etc. All right, where are my exits? Things like that. You can do rehearsals with your family at home, and don't scare them, make it fun. But it's like, okay, if you guys hear this code word, then somebody's in the house, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to that window and go over to the neighbors. You're going to do this. You're going to go ahead and bunker in place if you have a safe room, or if there's a fire in the home, how are we going to deal with this? Those are all rehearsals and things you can do before that situation happens. And in survival situations, folks, 95% of getting out of that is what you do before that situation happens. It's preparation, just like I was talking about in Bosnia, the stuff before the op. And so you've got that. Okay, we figured it out. Boom. This just happened. Somebody just kicked on our front door. We all know what to do.
Fascinating stuff and very helpful. It's not just entertaining, as I'm sure our listeners and viewers can see that you're a very engaging host, but the lessons that they can learn from this is fantastic. So our exit question, as usual, Cade, what are you most proud of from your time in service to our country?
I had the amazing fortune of leading some of the most incredible people in the world. People talk about difficulty with transition. I sleep like a baby at night, but when I got out of the teams, I realized, wow, I'm leaving my family, my brothers, my mission. And that was tough because what I didn't realize at the time, and I did once I got out, was that was such an incredibly unique and special situation, being surrounded by elite individuals that you trust with your life. That doesn't necessarily happen in the real world. And it was frustrating for me. But I had one of my C-Daddy, one of my mentors, he said, well, Cade, you can make a choice here. You can just be grumpy and frustrated, or you can say to yourself, you know what? I won the lottery, being in the SEAL teams, but the money's all gone, so it's time to press on. Most proud of working with those guys. Incredibly fortunate that I never lost any of my guys. Not necessarily because of me, but incredibly fortunate to have been in a position where everybody came home, and I love that too.
A record to be very proud of. Cade, congratulations on your success, and thank you for your time. Thank you for your service to our country, most of all.
Thank you for what you're doing, Greg. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. U.S. Navy veteran Cade Courtley. He served as a Navy SEAL and sniper, also as a SEAL platoon commander and security contractor. He's now the host of the Can You Survive This podcast. I'm Greg Corumbus. This is Veterans Chronicles.